a chat to bridge the gaps of diversity and destroy ignorance before it destroys another life. And today I have two guests with me today. Guests, if you would, please share your name and what you're up to in the world. What are we up to? You want to go first?
Yeah, my name is Edsel. Edsel Docena. Well, I'm studying right now to be a respiratory therapist, and the other part of my life basically is ministry, whatever the Lord has called me to do. Similar to what you're doing, demolishing ignorance one person at a time, so and
hi, I'm Noreen, and we're actually here at my place, and he's studying to go to school. I'm actually a speech therapist for a pediatric therapy clinic, and we both go to the same church, and we've been serving together for a long time.
3.5 years. 3 years?
Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe
like
3.5 years or 4 years?
Yeah. That's right. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. I'm honored to have both of you with me today. And I have several questions I always ask my guests. So other than your name and what you're up to in the world, what's your age? If you're willing to share, or you can give a range.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm turning 35 this year, so I'm 34 years old.
I'm 39.
All right. And then the other question I always ask is, what ethnic group do you identify as?
Well, I'm Filipino, so Asian. Yes, I always get that mixed with Pacific Islander, but they logged in as Asian. So
yeah. I'm also Filipino. I do have some Chinese descent, but I identify myself more as Filipino.
Right. And I'm Filipino Spaniard, so because most Filipinos are mixed, either Chinese or Spanish. So yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Educate us. I didn't know that.
Right.
Can you tell us more about that?
Well, let me see. Well, from what I've learned, basically the Spaniards colonized the Philippines for 400 years. So a lot of like what we've just been accustomed to is just like, the Spanish culture. My last name is Compuesto, which is, Spanish. And your last name is...
Docena means dozen in Spanish. So. Yeah.
Oh, they're both Spanish names.
Yeah, that's correct.
I love learning stuff. Thank you guys for sharing that with me.
Yeah, no problem.
Gotta break it down, you know what I'm saying? And then, what do I always ask? Ask where you're from. I have another question, I promise I do, but I can't remember it right now. Let me see. If I can look at my notes, I'll know.
No problem.
Oh, yeah, where are you from? And where do you currently reside?
Well, we live in Granada Hills, and I'm originally from North Hollywood here. So when I came from the Philippines in 92, I started immediately living here in North Hollywood. And I moved back and forth from here in Vegas, but I ended up staying here majority of my time. And
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How about Noreen?
Granada Hills, and let me see. I moved around a lot. My dad was in the military, so we moved around, I guess, in the different bases here in California. But I would say my family is originally from the Bay Area.
Okay, cool. Very cool. And just for people who are not sure, when they say Granada Hills, they're saying LA.
Right.
Because there's different people watching, and I just want to help them out for area. But so you guys are like Southern California. It's controversial in a weird way if LA is central or southern, but I consider it southern. I don't know. But anyways,
right, that's right.
Let's get into it. I'm in what I consider central, and I went somewhere that they consider it southern. I'm like, this is not southern.
What's your official city name?
I'm in Bakersfield in Kern County.
Oh, no way. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, but yes. So just as an insight for people watching, I know Noreen, and this is my first time meeting. Is it Edsel, right? Did I pronounce it correctly?
That's correct. Yes.
So it's very nice to meet you. It's good to see Noreen. Haven't seen her in a while. We know each other through women's Bible study called Pearl Set Apart, which Liliana started, and I've mentioned here before. So very grateful for Noreen's like leadership. She's definitely been an amazing sister in Christ to me and leader with that ministry. And I know you're always busy, so I'm personally shocked to see both you guys right now because I know Noreen's busy, and if you're a partner with her, you're busy too.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, you guys.
Yeah.
So I want to hear a little bit about your church. Like, what is your church like? What's the culture like?
Well, the culture of our church, our church is actually called Cross Culture.
Yeah, it's
so we really adhere to, as much as we can, the kingdom of God, right? So that's really what we try to, base ourselves on culture. But it's deeply rooted Filipino. So majority of our members were, the main members are Filipino. Our pastor's Filipino. So we're a pretty diverse group. But I mean, the one thing that's like a staple with our church is that we always have Filipino food.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's always a staple. So it's like if there's no rice, then it's just weird, So, but we have every type of ethnicity there, So we're happy with that.
Yeah, and I think one thing, our church actually used to be called Valley Praise Christian Church, but they changed it to Cross Culture to kind of diversify the the members of the church, so that people, when they walk by or drive their car, they're like, oh, this looks like an interesting church. We wanted to be more, just kind of,
yeah, we wanted to be more appealing to diverse groups,
not just Filipinos, because I guess you could say it's a Filipino, predominantly there's a lot of Filipinos there, but our pastor had definitely the intention to kind of, diversify the church, where there would be more, other ethnic backgrounds. So it wouldn't just be like the Filipino church. And so,
yeah, I love that. The way I see it, heaven is not divided. So that's really cool to hear the heart of your pastor. Thank you guys for sharing a little insight about that. Let's see here. So I have a lot of questions, but I'm just trying to figure out how I want to keep it kind of streamlined. But do you think people cling to like the separation in the church, as far as like, oh, this is a Filipino church, a Black church, or whatever, or white church? Do you think people are clinging to it? Why do you think people are clinging to kind of like a segregated almost mindset about the kingdom of God, like the church? Why do you think that is?
I think on the surface level, I think it's easy to look at churches and say like, okay, well, the reason why people are like, they cling to, just like segregating or isolating their culture, is they're afraid of change, right? But you know what? I really think that deep down, it really starts with like the family. A lot of families don't like the change. A lot of families want to just kind of maintain, because churches can sometimes be a lot of work. There's a lot of societal pressure at church. There's people have problems at church, and sometimes maybe it's not so much just the segregation of culture or ethnicity, but just remaining closed up, not opening up to other people, So, because I've seen it so many times where in our church, we would be led to open up to somebody, and it's nowhere near our own culture, but that takes openness, right? So I think division sometimes, or segregation sometimes, starts within like the family household, and their an inability to open up personal problems, personal issues. On the surface level, you could definitely say, and I think it applies to all churches. It's a threat to all churches, and in any group settings as well. Like people are just afraid of change.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. Did you want to share any thoughts on that, Noreen? Why you think people divide?
I think also just, it's true what Edsel had said, and I think there's just a level of, comfortability that people, have, and it's like, oh, okay, this, oh, they're Filipino, they can relate to me, we can eat Filipino food together, or I think especially with older, generations, they have that mentality, like, oh, okay, does anybody there speak Tagalog or the Filipino, and that's something that my parents have asked before, regarding my church, or our church actually. And so I think it has a lot to do with the level of just being comfortable in that environment, and what Edsel had said, just like, how it starts in the home environment. So I do believe that does happen. Actually, I was a little uncomfortable because I came from Shepherd of the Hills Church, which is a very diverse church, huge mega church, and then to come to I guess Cross Culture Church, which is like a smaller church, very intimate, maybe less than 200 people.
About 200. Yeah, about 200 members.
I was like, whoa, there's a lot of Filipinos here. So for me, it was, getting used to the fact that there were, more Filipinos at that church. And, like I said, I kind of like grew up being in a more diverse church, I guess you can say, such as Shepherd of the Hills. So it did get a little bit of, getting used to.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I have that similar sentiment for like a church that's predominantly Black, because unfortunately, I've never really been a part of one. Well, I guess like the first one I was a part of, it was really small, but it's kind of weird because people may look at me and just assume that I probably am used to being around like a lot of Black people, but I'm not. I'm used to being around a lot of mixed group of people. So I get what you're saying. And I gotta kind of touch on the closed-mindedness, and like I have this question about like learned behavior. Do you think that being closed-minded, like Edsel was saying about like the household, is maybe where it comes from? Do you guys think that it's a learned behavior, and is it something that we can unlearn and relearn, like another behavior as far as being closed-minded is concerned?
Yeah. It's so difficult. I think it's such a difficult thing to get over. I think the way that I would probably hit on that question is it's a combination of both. Definitely. It does take a certain amount of willingness, to be able to learn. But then, what are you learning, right? Like, like if the culture around you keeps you boxed in, then you're not going to know anything else, So I think that's why there are times that what you're talking about, is that like a learned behavior. Sometimes an individual will get an epiphany and say like, whoa, like there's like, I went to a different church this time and it was completely different. And I wonder why, like I'm curious, why was that experience different than like, let's say, for example, my home church that I've been going to for 13 years. I've known my auntie and my uncle, and my lolo and my lola, like for so long. And I had way more, let's say, fun at the other church, right? And it's like, it depends on what you're learning or what's being absorbed, So definitely it is a learned behavior. A lot of the church members, that's really important, because a lot of the church members right now that are at my church that are active have come from different churches and have found our church and had to make like a geographical step outside of their own church, their old church, just to, I don't know. I spend so much time like reading the word. I want to say they like get new wineskin, right? Like get something new, to be filled by something new, So, and it's almost like they had to get away from the old to experience the new, So, yeah, definitely. Like, there's a piece of people that's like, like they have to be like willing to do it, but to open up and to learn something new, you got to be willing to do that. And sometimes you got to take a step outside, if changes are not being made within the church, So, yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like what you're saying is that people have to kind of go outside of their social norms or their familiar spaces in order to experience maybe all that there is to offer, that it's maybe beyond what they were used to. So they have to go somewhere different, experience something different. That's what I'm hearing you say. I don't know if that's what you're...
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah. So, yeah, because, you know, I get pictures in my head and I kind of have to, like, you know, word through it, you know. So, you know, sorry about that. But, yeah, thank you for hearing what I'm saying, you know. So,
of course.
Yeah.
I tried to see the wineskin. I was like, what? You know what? I know that scripture, but I'm trying to think. I don't know what that looks like, but I was trying to picture it. Now I feel like I have to go Google what the wineskin and all this looks like. But so Noreen, did you want to answer that at all as far as like learned behavior? I know you teach kids to like learn things like speaking properly or well. So I don't know if you have any back on that.
No, just kind of like what Edsel was saying, it is a learned behavior, you know, or a combination of both. Like for me, for instance, it was a learned behavior for me to go to a Filipino church. And so it's kind of like the, you know, where me having to go to this new setting, meet new people, and just realize, hey, it's not so bad. I mean, yes, it's uncomfortable at first, but it's something that, I don't know, I guess you just have to get used to it.
I think you're like, well, I think there's a culture shock that you experience, you know. You move from like one church to another, and sometimes some people make a conscious decision to move from one church to another, and sometimes people are not making a conscious decision, they're just accepting an invite, you know. And sometimes they get a culture shock, like, whoa, like this is different, you know, like and then she had to learn, or make like a willing step to learn, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I'm thankful for that because, you know, I found her, you know, so.
I was going to say, I'm glad you took that step of faith, Noreen.
I know, right? I was like, no, I don't want to.
Your blessing was however many years down the street from you joining that church, so that's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so, culture shock. Now I'm a foodie. So you all mentioned Filipino food. I don't feel like I've ever had it. What is like the number one or like most popular foods other than rice? I know you mentioned that.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think a popular dish most people have heard of is lumpia and pancit or adobo. I think the adobo is like, what do you think? It's more...
Adobo is either chicken or pork. And it's a mixture of soy sauce and vinegar and garlic.
It's really good. I have to make you some.
Yeah, I mean, I think most societies and cultures within like the equator, like in that area of the world, have something like this, you know, something similar that will like, because, you know, I think the original idea of adobo was to make sure that it doesn't rot, because vinegar is a preservative.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so, you know, Filipinos use a lot of that because the temperature is really hot in the Philippines, so things expire quickly. So, but yeah, those are the most, you know, lumpia is rolled like
egg roll.
Like egg rolls,
and Chinese egg roll. You could put pork or chicken in there too, and then it's another. Like pancit is like chow mein. Like Chinese have chow mein.
Yeah.
We have noodles. Our version of like the noodles.
That's right. And of course, like we have the normal stuff too all the time. Like it's not like a Filipino party if there's no fried chicken. It's like it's weird if there's
really.
Yeah, everyone like it's just like someone will look around and there's no fried chicken. Like what happened here? You know? Like
really? Okay.
Yeah. That's right.
That's very southern of the Filipino cuisine. Very American southern.
Right. That's right. It's very famous in the Philippines. You know, like KFC was very famous when it first came up in the Philippines. Yeah. So it's still famous now. We have a Jollibee that's like it's our version of KFC, pretty much. You know, so it's pretty good. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
What is the Philippines like? I know that. Hold on. Edsel said he lived there, right?
I was born in the Philippines. Yeah.
You were born there.
Mm.
And then, Noreen, have you been there at all?
Yes, actually, I was born there too, but my family migrated here when I was 1. But we used to make frequent trips to the Philippines. I think the last time I was there was in 2017.
Okay.
I would say climate-wise, it's very tropical and humid, right?
It's humid, yeah.
Yeah, very humid.
Your face makes it seem like you don't like humidity.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Florida's opposite.
It's one of those countries that's like, oh, we only have 2 seasons. It's like hot and dry, or I mean, hot and wet season.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Yeah.
So like just like a lot of rain or nothing.
That's right. Yeah. So there's like a monsoon season, and then there's just like it's blistering hot and it's humid. Yeah. So. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing, both of you guys, about the Philippines? Like, what do you wish you could bring here? Other than you can't say like your grandma or something. Like, that's cheating.
I don't know.
But your favorite one or something. But like maybe something culturally.
Culturally, let's see. Okay, well, I would probably say Okay, so my parents grew up in a really small town, and everybody there was very, like, when I went there, was very friendly and trustworthy, and people would just go to each other's houses without even telling the person. So they would just show up. You know how here in the States, okay, I'm gonna go to your house, okay, like, you know, is it okay if I come over? But in the Philippines, it's such a, well, where I lived, it's such a small town that everybody, you know, trusted each other, and really just like, you know, people would leave their doors unlocked, and people would just like go in and say, hi, you know, I'm here just to say hi to you. And that was like a normal thing in the Philippines. When I just recall just visiting, we stayed at my aunt's house, and I just remember, you know, people would just show up randomly and just hang out. And I think I like that about the Philippines, because there's such openness, and really people there are just, I don't know, I feel like people were just trusting each other, especially in that community that my family, you know, lived in. So if I could take a piece of culture, I would probably take that with me, along with this Filipino dessert that only my grandma can make. It's called ube. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. It's like a purple yam. And it's purple fudge. And then people now here, I guess, love ube because they put it in everything, like ube cupcakes, ube cake, and I'm sure you've seen it. It's purple, and people call it, I guess, taro. You know,
I've heard of that.
Yeah, so I would definitely bring my grandmother's ube, the way she makes it, back here in the States.
Yeah.
Nobody can do it here in the States yet, like that, like grandma.
No, not like grandmas. It's different.
That's right.
What about you, Edsel? What's the thing you would bring back, like, or that you really appreciate for your culture back home?
I don't know if I can think of something else, because that's basically it. I think just like, for example, you know, when I was in the Philippines, our door was always open. You know, our door was always open. You know, there would be like the neighborhood dog that would terrorize every single person. You know, like they're just coming around, and then there's, you know, like my friends in the neighborhood, they would use my bathroom or my bathtub because it was the only bathtub in the neighborhood, right?
Oh wow!
Right, yeah. So, and then if we'd have water issues, we'd go down to the river and grab water and bring it back, stuff like that, you know. So it was like the community was family, you know. Plus, if someone stole something, you knew exactly where it went, you know. Like, you know, it was like the crazy kid in the neighborhood, you know, like. But anyways, like that was pretty much it. Like, you know, our living room was everyone's living room, you know. I mean, of course, like there were times that like it was, you know, you saw like the bad things about it, because, you know, like, you know, people would get like annoying or irritating or something like that. But same thing with every family, you know. So, but that's the way that the Filipino mindset was always, like, you know, like what's mine is yours sort of thing, you know. And people would probably, Filipinos would probably take offense if you didn't share something, you know. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, like not necessarily here, but like in the Philippines, you know, like if you didn't share something, then it would be like, you know, there would be like an offense, like, oh, like why, you know, like.
What do you mean, like share, like if you made something, a dish?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you an example. Like, my parents went here to the United States a couple years before we came here, right? So they left us behind with my grandparents, and they took care of us for about a couple years in the Philippines, while they were here making money, and they made good money over here. So what they would do every single holiday, they would send toys back. FAO Schwartz was open back then. Toys R Us was still open. So they'd send us boxes. So what would happen was that we would get the boxes. Immediately, my mindset was not, I'm going to keep all my stuff. My mindset was, let me go share this with everybody else. My little brother was not the same as I was. When he got stuff from my parents, he would hide it, right? And every single kid would talk to me all of my friends in the neighborhood would be like, how come Errol's not sharing? That's weird, and it was this culture of just sharing. And I was a little bit traumatized too, because I got this Ninja Turtle bike from my parents, and I was so excited. Not 15 minutes after I unboxed it, the big kid in the neighborhood sat on it and broke the whole thing. So yeah.
That's when sharing is not caring. Right. That is when it is not caring.
Yeah.
I hope they replaced it.
There was no replacing it. It was, nothing like that in the Philippines.
Ninja Turtles too. That's a whole level of fantasticness. I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah, no, it's okay though. It didn't kill the whole sharing vibe, but I did get offended by that, but so
yeah. Well, Noreen knows what to get you for Christmas this year,
right? Now she knows.
I know.
But that's really cool. Thank you guys for sharing that with us. And I think my last thing culturally is about stereotypes. What are some of the stereotypes that y'all have experienced or you have to face in your every now and then, or maybe it was more when you're younger?
Well, I think right off the bat, everyone would assume that I was smart. You're Filipino, you're Asian, you're smart. And it's well, thanks for telling me that I'm smart. But you look at my grades, it's not like I have the best grades in the world. There was that expectation. I think within the household there was an expectation culturally that you should be getting straight A's and everything like that. So that's that formed my childhood. There's this you gotta perform sort of thing. But at the same time, there was also an expectation on the outside as well. You're smart. You're Filipino, you're Asian, you're smart. So I think right off the bat, that's the first thing. So
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Mm-hmm. What about any stereotypes do you have to endure?
Yes. One thing I can remember is even till this day, people that I have, when I meet new people or, they have this assumption, oh, you're a nurse. I'm like, no, I'm not a nurse, because there's a lot of Filipino nurses here in the United States, which makes sense. And and also culturally, even with family, there's this expectation you should be in the medical field. You should be a nurse because this is, going to help you for your future. They make good money. And so I grew up, thinking I grew up with that kind of upbringing. My parents always emphasize, or are actually not my parents, I'm sorry, my relatives would emphasize, oh, you should be a nurse because, they make good money and you can control your schedule and all these things. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm not a nurse. I chose to become a speech therapist. It's just something different. But I would say that's probably one of the most common stereotypes that Filipinos encounter. If you, I've had people say, oh, you're Filipino. Oh, are you a nurse? I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not a nurse at all. So that's just something that I noticed. I've experienced stereotypes.
So true.
Do you ever feel like people assume what Asian country your ethnicity, your background is from? Do people assume incorrectly?
With you too, right? Well, with you.
No one guesses I'm Filipino. Only Filipinos will be like, oh, you're Filipino, or are you Filipino? But
what did they guess?
I've been called like half white, half Asian before, or like Mexican, for sure Mexican. Like I lived in the Valley for a long time, and like, you know, people would just come up to me and start speaking Spanish, and it's like, well, you know, thank God for high school Spanish, because I understand some of it, you know. And I would just kind of like respond, you know. But like most of the time, people would think I'm Mexican. Yeah, some people
like even Armenian.
Yeah, they think
Middle
Eastern and Armenian. Those were the funkiest ones that I've like gotten. You know, I was just like, oh wow.
My dad thought you were like Middle Eastern.
Really?
Yeah.
So I don't look like typical Filipino, I guess. You know, so right. Yeah.
So funny. It's so funny when that happens. What about you, Noreen? Do you ever get you wrong?
Yeah, some people have actually mistaken me for like Chinese. With I guess I don't know, the light skin. I guess because you know, maybe I guess most Filipinos are darker, but they sometimes confuse me with, oh, are you Chinese? I'm like, no. Well, I mean, I do have some Chinese blood, but you know, like I said, I identify myself as Filipino. What else? Chinese? Yeah, mostly Chinese. Yeah.
Okay. They're just going deep into your history with that one. At least it's in line, not like an Edsel, like Armenian or Hispanic, which is
right.
That means if you go into acting, you would be able to cross over in like at least 3 different categories.
Know, right?
So you're in LA, you know what I'm saying?
But you know, someone told me one time, they were like, "Oh, you're like half Mexican, half Chinese or something like that," and I'm like, "You basically described the Filipino right there, you know?" Like,
is that a combination?
Yeah, you know, like Filipinos is half Asian, half Hispanic, or half Chinese, half Filipino. You know, it's like so they weren't too far off. You know, I think majority of people are not that far off. You know, so yeah.
That's funny though. Thank you guys for sharing that too. Sometimes it's like awkward for me even to ask it, but I know that people think things, and I just want people to just say it, you know, like, let's just talk about it. Just put it out there. It's not weird if we say it after a while. So it becomes normal, and it becomes, you know, like an open conversation. But I'm going to do my closing. If you guys had any encouragement to share any thoughts, please share it. But thank you guys for tuning in today on Diversity Chats, where we bridge the gaps of diversity and destroy ignorance before it destroys another life. And I thank my guests, Edsel and Noreen. And do you guys have any closing thoughts as we end here?
You probably do. He looks so great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're right. I just want to echo what you just said right now. Let's just talk about it. I feel like you know, walls are, you know, kind of becoming more frequent these days. You know, where we can't even chat anymore. And sit down, and maybe even if we disagree on some things, we'd still be able to get a cup of coffee, you know, and sit in the same car, sit in the same room, you know. So this is a great way to be able to get to know one another, and you know, just listen to the other person, you know. So, and I think that's like my greatest encouragement, if I had any, is just listen to the person in front of you, and you might be surprised. You might be surprised, yeah. So, yeah. Thank you so much for inviting us.
This was fun.
Thank you both. I appreciate you both, and definitely what you said is the heartbeat of this. Is you never know who's where your blessing may come from, or who may be a help to you, or who you can be a help to. So don't judge a book by its cover, and stay open, and stay wise. But if you see these beautiful people, tell them, hey, I thanked you, and I know you cool, and let's talk. Edsel said he's buying everybody coffee, so I'm kidding.
Right.
He would.
You gotta find me first, or I gotta find you, you know?
Yeah, right. But yeah, so God bless you guys, and hope to see you around.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
God bless. Have a good night.